Hey everybody, this is Wayne and I'm back again with another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the FlipEars Aegis. So I've had the Aegis in my ear for the better part of a week now. I've listened to it almost non-stop. I did take some breaks to do some A-B comparisons, especially with the FlipEars Legion, as well as the Fat Freak Maestro Mini that I still have. And I'm basically ready to report back and give you my findings. So, shout out to Aries from FlipEars. This was received with the intention of reviewing as well as touring it. So I'm going to be sending this on with the Legion to a few other people to review. I think Audio Amigo and JTIS, they'll be able to squig it. So if you want to check out their squig and see kind of a general comparison, I suspect it's going to graph pretty similarly except for the treble extension. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I'm very happy with the Aegis. I really enjoy it, and it's really just coming down to what do you prefer more. So, do I prefer the Aegis versus Legion? How does it compare? We'll get into that. But again, thank you, Aries. So let's get into it. I did do an unboxing experience video already. I'll link that below here. That way you can kind of review it. If you want to see what comes with it, it comes with a phenomenal cable, L-Tech Baroque ear tips. Unboxing experience is phenomenal. But this is just going to condense this video review so it's not, pushing over 20 minutes. Well, let's get into the B-roll. So, the FlipEars Aegis is a one dynamic driver and one BCD driver IEM. It does not come with the Spark electric tweeter that the Legion does. And this retails for about $479, so there is a price difference. This is the little brother, so, the Legion is still retailing for about $849 right now. Do you hear a substantial difference? I think you do. Which one you prefer is just kind of come down to the eye of the beholder or ear of the beholder. In the case for the Aegis, because it's one dynamic driver and one BCD, it actually is a bit smaller in scope. Let me actually take off the tips, the final type E, which I enjoy. So it is a bit smaller compared to the Legion. This is not the stock cable that comes with the Legion. You can kind of see, and I kind of go over it a little bit more in my video unboxing experience, but the Aegis, it's a smaller IEM. The shield and the metal shell actually is pretty comparable, but it's really just the shell shape. The Aegis is going to fit people's ears probably a little bit better than the Legion, but the Legion is pretty still comfortable to my ears. So, how do I feel about it? Let's get into the overall sound. We'll do a comparison, and then we'll rank it up. So, how does the FlipEars Aegis sound? Bassy, warm. I will say, straight out of the gate, the difference between the FlipEars Aegis and the FlipEars Legion is that you are going to be getting a little bit more of a darker, warmer tonality with the Aegis. It's not like you're fighting in the shade, sorry, I had to throw in that 300 meme in there. But it's not like you're necessarily in a too dark of a space. It is darker. It is a little bit warmer overall. And that kind of influences the sound to be fuller sounding and deeper sounding with the BCD and the dynamic driver in the Aegis. So overall, it's a warm, bassy, what you take with the Legion, which is a more balanced kind of presentation with some treble extension that kind of brightens it up so it's not one note, it's a little bit more balanced. This is no, we're going to give you full mids and bass, and it's going to shake your head, and it's just a fun experience. It is going to be the more colored of the two, and really just comes down to your preference. But overall, the Aegis is a warm, bassy IEM that kind of fits my library perfectly. So the bass for the FlipEars Aegis, it is deep sounding, it is punchy, it is engaging. The BCD here is really working in overdrive, and I think it actually, maybe not as detailed as a Legion, but I think it's bassier sounding and warmer sounding overall. There's thicker note weight in the bass, so if you're listening to a lot of hip hop or something with a lot of kick drums, it really pushes forward, and I think it stands out more as a bassier set. It is probably one of my favorite basshead IEMs under that $1,000 mark. It's right up there with the Legion. I think it's bassier and warmer sounding, maybe a bit more thicker. The attack and decay is just chef's kiss. I think it's really well balanced. And I think, you know, where you're kind of coming down to is, do you want something a little bit more balanced, but still very punchy and deep? Or do you want something that's warmer and just way more engaging on the bass side? The BCD here is working overdrive. The dynamic driver is just a perfect coupling with the BCD. And overall, I think the Aegis bass is just phenomenal. So the mid-range for the FlipEars Aegis. The FlipEars Aegis has a more forward vocal and mid-range presentation. I think the male vocals come off as fuller sounding, a bit thicker note weight, a bit warmer tonality overall. Female vocals still sound great. They have a proper amount of air to it. I think because they're more forward overall, it comes off as kind of more L-shaped or checkmark shaped. I don't know how to necessarily say it. It's definitely less U-shaped than the Legion to my ears. So if you're looking for something like has a good amount of bass and more forward vocals, something that gets you more engaged with like really good instrument details, and with the BCD still hitting here, it's very engaging overall and very immersive. The soundstage and everything with the mid-range, the piano strings, the guitar plucks, everything sounds very full and forward. And you know, if that's your take or that's something that you enjoy, this is where the Aegis kind of stands apart compared to Legion, because Legion does come off as, you know, it's balanced, but maybe sometimes comes off a little bit more U-shaped with instruments. Vocals maybe come off as a little bit more airy, but the thicker mid-range for the Aegis kind of pushes it out and is where it stands out. So the treble for the Aegis. The treble is kind of where it's pushed down a bit more, and this is more of a darker tonality overall. I think the emphasis for the Aegis is more on the bass and the mid-range. Those are more forward, those are more engaging, while the treble is still there. There's still an amount of energy. You can still hear a good amount of like cymbal crashes and overall like air and shimmer, but it's not going to be as pronounced and as articulated as like the Legion, for example. So I think the Aegis, it is a bit more darker. It's probably more safer for the overall treble performance. It's not like it's missing, but it is noticeably darker and kind of is why the bass and the mid-range come off as fuller or more of a warmer tonality overall. Again, it's not missing anything on the treble side, but it is noticeably more pushed back compared to the FlipEars Legion. So the technical performance for the FlipEars Aegis is still good. I don't think it's as good as Legion's, and I will say, like, overall, I think the detail and imaging are still phenomenal. They're still top-notch. It's very clear. If you're expecting, you know, if listening to any busy tracks, you're expecting to be able to hear everything, you still can. Due to the treble energy kind of being more subdued, I do think it comes off as less resolving or less clear, but it's still very good there. With the BCD, you're still getting phenomenal soundstage. It's very enveloping. It feels like you're inside a stadium and then everything is kind of shaking around you. So you're still very much engaged on a soundstage like aspect. I just think it's not necessarily as technical or resolving as its older brother with the EST. And that's not necessarily a bad thing in this case, because the Aegis, where it shines is more in that warmer tonality. So you're getting more musical performance as opposed to technical performance and more analytical aspects and more balance. And I think it's a good compromise in this case to make it sound different and, you know, fit people that want that warmer tonality and don't mind taking small blow to the technical performance, because it's still there. It's just not as good. And the trade-off is that the Aegis just is a more fun musical set. So technical performance, still pretty good. It's pretty good. It's just not going to be as good as its older brother. So I've been doing kind of quick hits comparisons between the Legion and the Aegis, because it's pretty easy to do considering they both have the same dynamic driver as well as the same BCD driver. The Legion just has an EST, and you can hear kind of a difference between the two. So quick breakdown is that the Aegis is bassier and the Legion is more balanced. To go further into it, The Aegis has a bit more of a deeper sounding bass. I think it's punchier and deeper sounding, especially considering like the overall tonality is on the warmer side. Where I think the Legion kind of separates is that it has a bit more detail and control overall. So where the Aegis might sound as technically kind of more boomy sounding and more like in your face with the bass, the Legion is slightly more subdued. You're still getting phenomenal bass head energy here, but it is more on that controlled side compared to the Aegis. The mid-range is, where you kind of see more of a difference here. You see the Aegis has more of a warmer, fuller sounding mid-range, so the vocals come off as fuller, especially male. Maybe not as airy in female vocals on the Aegis, but it's still quite there. Detail and the overall instruments come off as very good on both of them. I think the Legion has a bit more of that special sauce for kind of general like orchestra or singer-songwriter, but the Aegis kind of has a bit more of that warmth there that kind of pulls through a little bit more in this case. The treble is kind of where the Legion does it better. So if you are more treble sensitive or ESTs don't agree to your ears, you might want to just go with the Aegis. But if you want more of that balance where you want to not be missing anything, I think the Legion is going to be more to your taste. Technical performance for the Legion is a bit better. Overall, the soundstage is a bit wider sounding, less congested, and probably a bit more detailed and more separated overall. So it kind of comes down to, do you want warm bassy or do you want more balance? That's kind of really comes down to, and I actually really do enjoy both equally. I'd probably give the nod towards the Aegis in my case for more general bass head tendencies. But if you want something to break it up, but you don't want to miss that bass head like BCD experience, Legion's where it's at. Now, how does the Aegis compare to like the Maestro Mini? Or like even the FlipEars X HBB Punch? Very similar in scope. The Aegis kind of hits deeper, is punchier than both of those, and I think overall is more engaging. I think it's a bit more tame in the mid-range and the treble compared to like the Maestro Mini and the HBB Punch. I think it kind of comes down to the Aegis just has that special sauce with the BCD. I think the Punch is still a good IEM. I think the Maestro Mini kind of takes the step back compared to the other two. So the Aegis is like one of the best bass head IEMs with good mid-range, maybe more darker on the treble side, not as bright and not as much energy there. If you want more of a balance but still a good bass head IEM, the Punch might be where it's at. I do think the Maestro Mini kind of gets lost in its dust here, considering the extra emphasis on the mid-range or the upper mid-range of the treble. I think out of those three, I would say the Aegis is better than the Punch as well as the Maestro Mini. And also against the Singularity that I listened to, I think the Aegis really hits above its price point in this case and takes its rightful place as the best bass head IEM under $1,000. So, other things to note, the FlipEars Aegis kind of works for a wide variety of libraries, honestly. I think the excellent bass here and the excellent mid-range especially works for like hip-hop or rock music. It may not have the speed like necessary for like metal or something like that, but I think overall you wouldn't be dissatisfied with this. It is a bit warmer on that side, so if you are expecting more energy on the treble, you will have to bump it up a little bit to be a bit louder. And honestly, I think it works for like moderate high to high volume listening. Like it's super fun and super engaging, and just putting on some like heavy bass music or like hip hop or like rock music like the Black Keys, everything just shines and it's just a fun, engaging musical listen. Sources, I honestly think the sources that work well with the Aegis are kind of more neutral toned. So I don't think you necessarily need to put it on like a warmer source or like tubes or anything like that. I think like, I have my DX340, I have the JDS Element 4. I think those work really well with it, and I think it really brings everything out. It does like a little bit power, so I definitely recommend that. But overall, like you could bump up the volume and put on a more neutral source, and it works really well. I think like the Legion, like I could put it on tubes, and it actually, I actually like it on tubes a lot, but the Aegis, it comes off as a bit thicker than it needs to on tubes. Not that it's a bad thing, so if you want some thick oatmeal, like this is the way to go. But overall, I think a more neutral source works really well with the Aegis in this case. So, in conclusion, the FlipEars Aegis is a phenomenal IEM, and it is priced so well with this phenomenal package with a great case, a bunch of tips, a great cable. The unboxing experience is very premium. The IEMs themselves are gorgeous, and the sound experience is on another level. It's probably my favorite Basshead IEM under $1,000. The bass is very engaging, it's very enveloping, it's deep, it's punchy. The warmth of the mids are just so good, and overall, it's a welcome addition to the Arsenal collection. I think if you're looking for, a quick idea of which one to get, Aegis under $500, yes. If you especially want more warmth and more bass performance. If you're looking for something a little bit more balance and you can push up, I do think it is worth going up to the Legion for somebody that wants more balance, a little more treble energy, and a bit more control overall. I think the Legion's still a great IEM, but I think the Aegis is probably the one I really would listen to more regularly. So overall, I give the Aegis a 5 out of 5. I'm biased because I love that bass, I love that mid-range, and I love that BCD experience. I think it's a phenomenal IEM. Both of them are, and if you are in the market for a Basshead IEM under $500, the Aegis is where it's at. It's hard to beat, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So yeah, kudos Aries, you knocked it out of the park here. That's it, and thank you so much for watching. Bye guys.